Welcome to Organizational Sherlocks, the podcast where business meets psychology and your organizational puzzles meet their match.
Join us for captivating stories and practical solutions to unravel your toughest challenges.
I'm Dr. Elizabeth Fleming.
And I'm Morgan Ashworth, your guides to a prescription for business success.
Let's dive in.
Well, welcome back, everybody. We've definitely had an exciting recent month talking a lot about leadership, bringing on some guests, and we actually provide you guys with a little bonus episode. Now, that's not the end of talking about leadership, but definitely don't want to over-focus on leadership and forget about some of the other things that are important in business. Right, Elizabeth?
Oh, 100%. Absolutely. I think that leadership is key to everything that we do. It's just always kind of weaved into all of our conversations, so it won't be the end for sure.
Yeah, certainly. No matter what size your company is, there's a lot of leadership involved, whether it's you as the leader, you hiring managers to lead, or even just hiring people that you want to hopefully have lead down the way. It's super important. And we got a little bit of insight on what it's like to go through some leadership testing, leadership skills, leadership programs, which is nice to introduce you guys to.
Yeah, absolutely. Out of curiosity, Morgan, have you ever gone through any kind of testing for leadership or just kind of in hiring, all of that? Have you had that experience?
Yeah, I've done it a little bit. I've been very much involved with the DISC assessment over time. So that's a very common one people hear of. So the DISC, for those who don't know, it's kind of like your leadership personality, as people tend to say. It's really applicable to the workplace, though it's not the only thing you can use. But I have done some, leadership certifications in the past as well. And there's so many to choose from. So sometimes it's hard to cover them all, right?
Oh, absolutely. There are so many on the table at any given time. And I think some companies, they are maybe just used to a certain tool or have really heard a lot about them. I think, obviously this is my world. I do a lot of testing for leaders and kind of hiring in general. And so I think the biggest kind of takeaway what I try to help my clients understand is there's a time and a place for every single tool. And the DISC is great for certain things, maybe not so much for others. I know we're going to dig into that today, but I put you on the spot asking if you've ever done anything. So I will share that I have every assessment tool that I use. I have also taken myself. So it's kind of a fun experience and just kind of creating some self-awareness and really understanding kind of what are some of those common themes, that come up. And I've learned that about myself. And then part of my job is to help others understand that about their potential hires. And then potentially, potential, or I'm using the word potential a lot, but potential promotions is where I was going with that.
Yeah.
So just that level of self-awareness and kind of understanding of, what am I all about?
Yeah, that's exactly my use of leadership testing or personality testing, aptitude testing in general in the past. It's all for self-awareness, not just for myself, but for the employees, for the team members I'm working with, to make sure that they are, in the fact, self-aware. Prevents a little bit of that internal bias we all have. So it can be important. And as an individual using a test for any reason, you really need to ensure that you also partake in that test and understand it thoroughly. That's something I do tend to caution people towards is, make sure you use it. Make sure you know how it functions first, and be careful of how you use it too.
Oh, 100%. I think it's important too. And I know that you and I are a little bit of kind of scientists on the back end too, right? Like we get into research and all of that.
Maybe you more than me, but definitely.
Well, yeah, no, definitely me. I teach statistics and quantitative research. So yeah, I'm pretty nerdy, but I will say that I think it's important, again, just the application of a lot of these tools that you're looking at their intended purpose, kind of what they were designed to do, as well as their reliability and validity over time, because, it's easy to grab for kind of the most pretty tool or thing that seems like, gosh, this is going to solve all of my problems, kind of that silver bullet, if you will. And I think I can understand that, because there are times where in my life I want something that's easy. And the ramifications of doing that can be pretty great. So like, for example, the Myers-Briggs is one that's really popular,
Mhm.
right? A lot of people know it, probably have taken it. And I don't think it's a bad tool, right? But even if you just look at their manual, the manual for it, it says this is not intended to be used for hiring purposes,
Yeah.
right?
But others
So
are
I think
using it,
about that and
right?
I think, well, then why would we do that? They're telling us it's not intended for that use, right?
Mhm.
So I think that's an example of just kind of making sure you understand kind of the ins and outs of what the tools are all about and what they're intended for.
Yeah. Also, in a legal sense, the Myers-Briggs test, it's an important legal disclaimer to have, is so that they're not held liable for anything either. So there's a two sides to that. Both, they're warning people against doing that because it's not the
Mhm.
right thing to do, but also kind of protecting themselves, which is the smartest way to go. All companies
Absolutely.
should be able to have some sort of liability protection, right?
Mhm.
So definitely, we hinted to this in the last podcast, in episode 11 was it?
Yes.
And we talked about how leadership testing is very common, and too many people use leadership testing to determine who they're going to go with. When meanwhile, they really should be using it for determining how to train the person or what they specifically should focus on, whether that be aptitude wise, skill set based, all sorts of different types there. But definitely, we hinted to this in the last episode, which is why we want to talk about, when it comes to hiring, should you use these tests? What does it look like? And, the hiring world in general.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, hiring, it's, in my time in kind of the workforce and as a consultant, there's been a lot of ups and downs, right? The
Mhm.
pandemic kind of threw us for a loop. I mean, for anyone who was working at that time or knew somebody who was, you probably remember that hiring kind of stopped. It
It
went
did.
on a freeze. And people, because they didn't know what was going to happen, right? We didn't know what was going to happen kind of just social distancing wise. We didn't know what the economy was going to do. And it kind of freaks people out. I think that has, again, there's been kind of ups and downs with that. I'm seeing a lot more hiring now, a lot of jobs
Mhm.
available for folks. And now it's more of a question of, well, gosh, well, who's the best candidate, right? Who's going to be the
Yeah.
best fit for me right now or for this organization right now? And in what position?
Yeah, definitely. US weekly job claims. I mean, that's constantly changing, and we've definitely seen less people leaving jobs and more people retaining at their current position. And then also unemployment, it's constantly up and down though. I feel like we can't really see a constant there. I feel like, there has been a relative pattern, but that's not necessarily what we're here to speak to, right? Hiring is quite the industry to be in, recruitment and hiring. From no shows to ghosting candidates, but it's crazy. I mean, I've seen it on both sides, where people are no showing their interviews constantly, but also hearing from candidates about how they've been ghosted by employers. They're not hearing from them. At least update your candidates, right?
Right.
Same thing as even when people are hired, they end up no showing the position.
Mhm.
I feel like with the terms like quiet quitting, things like that coming into play, there's definitely quitting, there's quiet quitting, there's also just becoming a ghost. I have seen ghosting more and more often, and no matter what we do, you tend to see it. When it came to hiring for us, though, at the company I work internally at, we did, play with some aptitude testing. We played with some personality testing in the past, not that it was for the purpose of hiring or not, but it was to really get to know the person and see, okay, where are their deficits, where could they improve right off the bat, right? And I'll be honest, I really was saddened to see that one of the programs we used, it was made by Iowa psychologists.
Mhm.
It's considered valid, it's considered reliable. If it's considered valid and reliable, I shouldn't have over 75% of people testing the exact same way,
Oh,
right?
nice.
And so
Right.
we moved away from that one, and I hope that they are improving it.
Mhm.
But you have to be careful, and sometimes it's important to bring a consultant in to help you that has that scientific basis and not just rely on the people to know what they're talking about because they're trying to sell you a product.
Yeah, that's a really good point because again, I mean, so I like to the way I describe it to my clients is I'm never going to throw data over the wall, right? And I say that meaning I'm never just going to say, here's your personality, or your candidate's personality results, or here are their aptitude testing results, figure it out, right? My job as a consultant is to use both the data that's there, that more objective data, the numbers, the more nerdy side, I guess you could say, which I absolutely love, but making sense of it within the context of the environment, within the context of the organization, their history, their career, their aspirations, all of those pieces of information come into play for me when I am writing that final report that I'm going to deliver to my client, right? And I think to me that if you're searching for a consultant, or wanting to be one, I would strongly recommend that you don't just throw data over the wall. One, because you don't know who's receiving it on the other end, and if they're knowledgeable about what the data means. You don't know that, right? And even if they are, they're hiring you for a purpose, right? And for a reason. And I think that I always I guess I'm giving you a lot of kind of things that I say to my clients all the time today, but I always say I'm in the business of developing people, right? I'm not in the business to be your decision maker. I will help supplement that decision for you. I will help you understand, what are this person's strengths, where are some of their development areas. But more than anything, I believe so wholeheartedly that it is my job to give my clients information that will help them help their employees be successful and develop as people.
You're translating research. You're creating the applicability of research that we look at. And that's why people like us exist, right, Elizabeth? That's why we're here. That's why we're talking to you, because that is what we're doing through this podcast is we're translating research, we're translating trends in the industry, and we're just talking to you about it. I've developed small companies. Elizabeth has consulted with companies. We've worked with nonprofits. We've worked with for-profits. We've worked with trades. We've worked with blue collar, white collar, who name it. We've probably worked with it.
All of it. Yes.
And that's because there's so many different ins and outs. And that's why as a small company, you tend to look externally for consultants. And that includes recruitment firms too. I know I work with recruitment firms, even though I am well adept in the hiring processes. Sometimes a recruitment firm is just going to more easily be able to bring you candidates that you couldn't otherwise get or, know of without them. And you can use recruitment firms, consulting firms like Elizabeth and mine, or you can work with legal companies. You can work with PEOs, payroll, and HR-based PEOs. There's a lot out there. There really is. Not to get too far off topic, though.
Yeah. No, I think that's a good point, though, because, a lot of the clients that I work with, it's not that they can't do it on their own. And I know that, right? And we talk about that. I know that they are fully capable of hiring amazing people. I know that. And a lot of them are really just looking for that extra level of data that you don't say that again. Guidance, right? That you don't always get from having conversations during your traditional interviews, right? There's just a level, and I will say that the tools that I use have validity indicators in them. So I can tell if someone is trying to make themselves look more favorable than maybe they really are, right?
Kind of like having a trick question, right?
Kind of, yeah. And to me, that's important. And to my clients, that's important because if they're doing that in an assessment, right, a true, false, or multiple choice assessment, right, who's to say that's not happening during the interviews, right? A more subjective experience of kind of identifying someone's skills and aspirations and all of those things. So
some people interview really well and they're good at making themselves look good. They might be good at hiding a lie too, right? Not that people are able to lie in an interview, nor should they.
No.
But people definitely can lie in interviews. They can make themselves make you look at them like you're wearing rose-colored glasses, right? And that's why validity assessments, those quote-unquote trick questions, are super important. And that's also why it's important to have either an expert or be using them in a way that, you're not going to put yourself at risk, and kind of holding those assessments with a grain of salt at times. And that's why we say don't hire with them, train with them.
Absolutely. I think I see these assessment tools as being kind of one piece of the greater puzzle. I mean, there's so many other pieces and things to consider. I know and I think I alluded to this before, but for my clients, I offer them recommendations. So if they're onboarding, if they're bringing someone on new from outside, I don't just give the data. I also say, here are some onboarding recommendations. Here are some ways to get this person up to speed quicker, more effectively, more efficiently, all of those things. And then kind of on the flip side, if it's someone who's already internal in the organization and they're maybe looking to promote or move positions or whatever it may be, kind of what are some recommendations for the manager, right, to help them be successful. So it's not just about what can I do in my own career, but what can you, Morgan, do to help support me to grow?
It's kind of like that term I tend to say is not just as, so it's not communication that's key, it's comprehension that's key. And so comprehending how your people learn, comprehending how your people function, the way in which, their brain works, kind of, even if it's just kind of this in tune sense, that is super important. So knowing that your communication style that has always worked for you isn't necessarily communicating in the way you think it is, whether that be because the person's neurodivergent, they're not paying attention, something along those lines. There's multiple reasons that a communication style might not quite work for one person over another. But making sure that you communicate and train in a way that is receptive to the person, right? And yeah, I mean, I really like to I love using aptitude tests. I love using skill tests. I really love using personality tests even. But like I said, we have moved away from personality tests across hiring. One question I have for you, Elizabeth, though, is I'm going to put you on the spot this time.
Oh boy.
What if a company feels like they have two candidates, whether they have a formal rating system where they're rated the exact same, or in an informal rating system, because lots of small companies have them, where they feel almost the same about them, and the only difference they have to go off of is a personality test? What should they do?
Well, I would argue that there are probably more differences that they're just not considering. I say that because again, going back to context, right? And future goals, and what is the mission of the organization. One of the tools that I include in my battery, and for those who aren't sure what I mean by that, it's I don't use one program. I use multiple programs put together into what we in the psychological world call a battery of tests from different areas. One of the things that I use is a motivational tool, right? Or a work style tool. So it's not just looking at personality, it's not just looking at aptitude, but it's looking at how do you work, right? Not just what is your interpersonal style or your ability to, take in conceptual information, but how do you work? Are you someone who's super tenacious, right? And you want to get things over the finish line? Are you more creative? Well, do you want to bring in innovation, all of those things, right? And then what motivates you? Are you someone who's really mission driven? And I've worked with candidates who are very status driven, right? It's more about title and money. And so we look at all of those really small differences. So while their personality and their problem solving data might look almost exactly the same, what does that company need right now? What do they need in the future? And how can we make sure that we're also considering those? So I hope that answers the question, but I think there's always more to it than what's on paper.
Yeah, I think there is too. I feel like it's really hard if you're only seeing a difference, or you think you're only seeing a difference within the personality. I mean, yes, you could technically take into account the motivational factors of the personality, but is that exactly true? Because the personality test isn't really going to point to motivators like a work motivation questionnaire would, right? Work motivation is super important to look at. And if you don't want access to another test, you don't want to pay for another test, if that's the way that you would have to go, then one thing I always say is actually utilize organizational commitment questions. So use questions that to ask about what connects them to the company. See what they find meaning in at the company. Is it the people they have met so far? Is it the story of the company? That's a really good factor. If it's the story of the company they're attracted to, the purpose, the mission, like you said, Elizabeth, even just the products that you're doing or the industry you're in, having questions oriented towards their interest in those pieces or how they find value or connection to them, that can also help, because it without utilizing a test. While it's not as valid, you have to use kind of your own intuition in that way, but it prevents you from needing to pay for another test too.
Yeah.
There's or it could be a supplement to the test. Who knows, right? But organizational commitment questions is really a route that I have been pushing people to go towards, especially as Elizabeth and I have talked about mission and alignment over and over and over again.
Yeah. And that's actually a core component of the questions that I ask. So in when I'm doing these evaluations, because we not only do the, personality assessments or aptitude, motivation, work style, whatever it is, but also I'm interviewing the people and I'm interviewing the people at the company and the candidates and all those things. And I ask those questions. I do have some clients that, like you had mentioned, aren't maybe interested in adding one more assessment tool. And I think that's perfectly fine, right? I'm going to support them in that journey, but I'm going to, of course, give them my expert opinion on that, I guess, if I can call it an expert opinion.
I think you can.
I think so. I think at this point I'm okay. But I'll obviously give them my recommendation. If they don't choose to go that route, one of the things I'll do with them, and I think this speaks to what you're talking about, Morgan, is I'll help them curate questions that they can go back and ask, right? That they can ask and really keeping it more open-ended and kind of help them identify what are some of the pieces that you should be listening for, or where are the red flags, where are the bright, shiny pieces that you should be looking for. And so sometimes my job is testing and leadership assessment. And sometimes it's just simply guiding and working collaboratively with the HR teams and the hiring managers and all of that to make sure that they have the tools in their toolbox so that they feel confident that they are bringing on the right person.
Yeah, training people how to hire and developing them to have an understanding of how the hiring process can, ebb and flow is also important. So guiding them in the right direction. Super, super important. I mean, I'm just like thinking back to some of what I've gone through, training supervisors, training managers. We use behavioral interview questions. We really focus on those organizational commitment questions. That's more the HR team that does that, since we really build those internal marketing campaigns and like as well. But definitely there are so many different routes you can go with hiring. Just make sure that you're going into hiring in an educated way. So make sure that you're hiring in a way that is going to be supportive of you. And, don't be afraid to ask follow-up questions. People say, I hire from my gut. Not the best idea. We'll both be honest. But
Too subjective. Subjective.
But your gut is also, you have intuition. You have to. And so that's why you should ask follow-up questions, whether that be in an interview or after an interview, right? Because if your gut's telling you something's wrong, or something's right, then ask the follow-up question. You might as well. It's also increasing the touches you have with your candidates, which decreases the likelihood of them ghosting.
Absolutely. I would completely agree with that. Yeah, I think it's all about the questions you ask, how you ask them, and the integration of, again, tools that are helpful and beneficial and created for the purpose that you're needing, right, to solve whatever problem it is. And I will say too that I think there's a lot of companies that do use them. I do know that. I work with a lot of clients. I know other firms that work with a lot of clients. So there's a good number of people out there, and so I'd encourage people, talk to the people around you, see what they do, right? Because it might be interesting to kind of hear about the different techniques and strategies of kind of the different organizations, of the people that it's part of networking. I ask people all the time, so what do you do, right?
Yeah.
I've learned things, and it's helped me to modify my approach so that I can meet the needs of my clients more effectively, simply by just talking to people and being curious.
Yeah, exactly. Being curious, wanting to know more from those around you. Don't be afraid to learn from those around you. You should not be the smartest one in the room, and you're likely not, to be honest. There's someone that knows something you don't. And so ask the people around you. I mean, just within candidacy through the pandemic and the years following it, the best way to get a job was through friends of friends. And so it's through your network. And so it's through your network to get a job. It's also through your network to build the best hiring programs for your job, whether that be building the job description, the way in which you post the job, where you post the job, and then the types of tests you use, how many interviews you do, all is involved within that.
Yeah. Oh yeah. There's so many different avenues, right? And I think it's just all, it's just about being curious and wondering about it. So I'm wondering, Morgan, I know we ended one of our last episodes with kind of a question to the audience. I'm wondering if maybe we want to do the same as we wrap up today's episode.
Yeah, I think so. Are you good if I go with the question?
Please do.
Okay. Well, there are lots of strategies when it comes to hiring, and we want to know what type of position you guys might want to learn about building a strategy behind when you're hiring for that position. So, you know what, let us know what position or what types of positions you might want us to look into, and we'll do a case study on it for the next episode.
Sounds great. I can't wait.
Okay. Well, Elizabeth, why don't you conclude us?
Absolutely. Well, this concludes another intriguing episode of Organizational Sherlocks. I'm Elizabeth Fleming.
And I'm Morgan Ashworth, reminding you that the journey to success is an ongoing investigation.
Remember to stay curious, stay strategic, and keep utilizing insights to decode your business mysteries.
Join us every other Tuesday, soon to be every Tuesday, for your next Who Done It. This is Organizational Sherlocks, closing today's case.
See you next time.